Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining another one of these brief Teams talks that we have on Wednesdays following convocation. Today, I wanted to talk about how you can identify predatory journals as well as vanity press, journals that you might want to avoid if you're considering submitting manuscripts, particularly if you're faculty. But you also might use this if you're students, if you're looking at a journal and you're not sure about the credibility of it or not. So I'm going to be showing a couple tools you can use to help identify those predatory and vanity press. The main thing I'm going to show is something called Beall's List, and it's just beallslist.net, and this is actually started by a librarian who did a lot of the groundwork in finding out a lot of these predatory journals and vanity press. But it's actually a database you can search through. It was an original list that has since been added to. You can identify predatory publishers that might have multiple journals. There's also a standalone journals list that you can look through. It's got the original list here. So if you find the title of the journal you're considering on this list, I would say mark and avoid. You can also go to an update, and these are added as they're found, when they're found to be predatory. But you can also search. You can search through this database using this search box up here. You can search for a publisher or URL. Something else that's kind of cool is it's got vanity press, which again is not as bad as predatory, but you don't really want to waste time submitting manuscripts to vanity press. It's just not if they don't have a real peer review process or a serious academic reputation. But you can search through those. There's also a list of vanity presses here. Surprisingly, Apple Academic Press is considered a vanity press. So this is something you can use to identify those that you might want to avoid. Another way that you can verify the credibility of a journal is a resource we have called Scopus. You may be familiar with Web of Science, which is another resource that's been used in the past for determining impact factor of journals, authors, to find publications. There's another resource we have from Elsevier in place of that now called Scopus. And if you go to the LUCOM LibGuide and go to A to Z databases, you'll find an alphabetical list here of our resources, and Scopus is right here. And it takes you to the resource on Elsevier. It might take a second. And what you can do is you'll see you can actually search for documents. You can search by article, title, abstract. You can look for authors. But if you see up here, it's got search, it's got sources. They index over 44,000 journals here, and you can actually download that list and you can search through it. If your journal title is appearing in the index list here for Scopus, it's legitimate. It's a legitimate journal. It can be trusted for academic peer review for a legitimate scientific journal. So that's another way that you can verify. Another resource we have, if you go to the LibGuide, or excuse me, course guides and textbooks, we go to A to Z databases, and you can go to Ulrich's Web. And this is a resource which is useful because it will have sometimes a newer journal might not be indexed in Scopus if it's fairly recent. Those of you who are familiar with the Curious LUCOM Medical Journal and how the process of indexing a journal in PubMed or Medline being indexed can be pretty. It can take a while. It can take up to a few years for that title to show up. This has Ulrich's Update, which will have newly added titles that are legitimate, that you just might not be able to find them in the Scopus index list, but they are legitimate journals. And you'll see they've got newly added titles. Sometimes a title can change. They'll have that information here. If something has stopped publication, it's got information about cessation of that journal. And then sometimes journals will merge. And so, for example, there's only one here, but it's got an example of two journals that merge into one. So that can be useful if you don't find the journal on Beall's List, but you also don't find it in the Scopus index list. You might look for it in the newly added titles of Ulrich's Web.
So, Rob,
sure.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when you use the word that it's predatory, what does that actually mean in terms of, my computer, the functionality? I mean, is it going to bust something in my system or
No,
You
no,
know,
it's
or does
it's
it just
more
mean I'm going to get a lot of random emails from places I don't want? Or
it's more in the sense that you're going to end up probably paying a lot of money for a journal that has fake peer review and not serious scientific rigor. It's just a waste of time.
gotcha.
Waste of time and
Okay.
money.
Okay.
Vanity Press is not quite as bad, but still not something you really want to invest a lot of time in. So we want to make sure that actually there is peer review. And another thing I want to show here too, like these are big examples, obviously, but like so JAMA, right? If you're going to make if you're looking at a journal's website, you want to look for a section that has some kind of information about the submission process, the editorial review process, and usually there'll be some kind of link like you see here that says for authors. And so it's got information about their journal, how to submit your manuscript, instructions for authors. You should be able to find information about their peer review process. This is what you want to look for. This suggests, obviously, we know JAMA is a legitimate journal, but if you're looking at another journal and you want to look for this kind of information on their site that suggests, yes, this is a legitimate journal. They have a legitimate peer review process, real editorial process. It's a serious publication. Another big one we have is Nature. Obviously, this is a big journal, but they have a link here instead of it says publish with us, and it's got four authors for referees. So if we go to four authors, it's got information on their editorial criteria and processes, information about your submission. It's got all kinds of information about their process for actually getting something published with their journal. So this gives another strong suggestion. Obviously, we know Nature's a serious journal, but you want to look for something like this on a journal that you're not sure about. If you go to a journal, I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but if you go to a journal that says, "Oh, sure, just email your PDF and $200 and it's going to be published," then you probably want to avoid that. So that's just the basics of what I wanted to show today. Again, Beal's list is kind of the standard for looking for a predatory or press or a predatory publisher or a vanity press. And again, there's an original list. There's also updates to that. And you can look for publishers or standalone journals, and also for Vanity Press. Scopus is what we use through. We have access to this through Liberty University, and you can go to that sources, and it's got an index over 44,000 titles that are indexed that are legitimate journals. And that Ulrich's web is going to have Ulrich's update, where you can find newly added titles that might not necessarily be indexed on Scopus, but you don't find them on Beal's list either. They might be in that Ulrich's update. And then for the journals themselves, if you're looking at their website, you want to look for information for publishers, for authors, how to make submission, information about their peer review process, and an explanation of the whole process for submitting manuscripts with them. So that's all I really wanted to show today. I know it's very brief, but I think it's useful, especially if you're a faculty member or a student working on something, you want to submit a manuscript for publication. You don't want to waste your time with journals that aren't worth your time. So thank you guys for joining, and this recording will be up on the LibGuide as well.
Thank you.
I have a question just before you finish up.
Sure.
Just to verify, both the Beals and Scopus and the last one you just showed, they're all for looking up the journal to see if it's predatory or not to necessarily check to see if the journal is worth publishing to or not, right?
Well, Beal's list is a list of predatory. So if you find the journal here, you want to avoid it.
Oh, okay.
If you find the journal here, that's an indication it's a legitimate journal.
Okay, cool. Okay.
It's likewise with Ulrich's update. If you find a journal here in newly added titles, it's probably a legitimate journal. It just hasn't appeared in Scopus yet.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolutely.
Bye.